Oh my gosh, you guys. I don't know why I decided to film today. It has been like kind of cold in the city or in New York, and for some reason I decided to film today, and today is the day that it's very warm. I am filming in my living room where I get direct sunlight, and it is slowly coming in through the windows, and I can feel the temperatures rising. And I know my hair is going to start frizzing out, and my makeup is going to start melting. So none of that matters. What matters is what we're chatting about today, which is another great episode. If you are new here, my name is Shalini, and this is the Real Thesis podcast. This is a podcast where I like to analyze films and all the components that work together to bring the story to life. Let's dive into our film. Today, we are talking about Sister Midnight. The film premiered at the 2024 Cannes Film Festival, and it had a limited theatrical release last year at 2025 when I had seen it. The film is written and directed by Karan Kandhari, and he actually was nominated for a BAFTA for original debut. It was his first debut feature film, and I think he did a great job with it. And the film stars Radhika Apte, Ashok Pathak, and Chaya Kandam. Really great cast. They did a really fantastic job with it. I think especially Radhika Apte, her acting is just absolutely amazing in this film. But I'm going to dive into the plot. The film begins on the wedding night of Uma, played by Radhika Apte, and Gopal, played by Ashok Pathak. They're riding the train home, and they arrive at a one-room shack in Mumbai, which is their new home. They are basically strangers. They really don't know each other at all, so they are incredibly awkward with one another. And as Uma begins her married life, she realizes that life at home as a wife is just incredibly lonely and boring. Gopal is gone all day. He works and then he goes out drinking after work. So he usually is just gone all day and comes back late at night. And she has absolutely nothing to do all day. But despite the boredom, she really does make an effort in her marriage. She tries to learn how to manage a household. She learns how to cook from her neighbor Sheetal, played by Chaya Kandam. And she really makes an effort in her marriage, but they just have absolutely no relation at all. They have no sexual relation. They really are like strangers to one another. And in general, this life is just incredibly boring, incredibly lonely for Uma. She just sits around the house all day and does nothing. And even when she does cook dinner, like it just is still such a boring and lonely enterprise. One day, they attend a wedding, and Uma overhears from two people gossiping about them that basically Gopal couldn't find anybody who wanted to marry him, and people thought Uma was insane, so like everyone just kind of threw them two together, and that's how they ended up in an arranged marriage. And she's so frustrated by hearing this because her marriage is already so like unromantic and nothing probably like from what she imagined. So they're sitting in this wedding, and it's a long Hindu wedding, and she gets very annoyed by a fly zapper. So she goes and unplugs it, disrupts the wedding, and gets bitten by a fly. And they go home that night, and her and Gopal have a huge fight about their marriage and just how frustrating it is for both of them. And it ends with Uma basically getting a bug and just getting very sick and spending the night throwing up. The next day, again, it's the same day like every other day, but Uma is just so tired and bored, which is sitting around the house with nothing to do. So she takes a train to the end of the line to go to the shore. She's sitting at the beach, basically just trying to have like a quiet moment, and she looks around and realizes that several other people are also sitting alone at the beach crying, and she's like, this is too pathetic for me. So she goes to a building and asks for a job, and the only job they have is a night cleaner. So she begins her job as a night cleaner. As she works as a night cleaner, she starts to really just kind of settle into her new life. Her marriage is still very non-existent, but she gets into a good groove of going out at night to work. Basically, as Gopal is coming home, she's going out to leave. She does her job. She's made friends with the man who operates the elevator in her office building. She's made friends with the Hijras who live close to where she works. And she just gets into a good groove, even though her days are still terribly boring. Unfortunately, she's still very sick. She is not able to regulate her body temperature. She's freezing cold in the day. She's really hot and restless at night. She's not able to sleep on the nights that she's not working. Her hearing gets incredibly sensitive, and she's just bothered by sound, even when it's dead quiet at night. And she gets weaker and weaker and actually just passes out at work one day. And on her way home, after the day that she passes out, she sees a goat and she tackles it and drinks its blood. And yes, this is the point where you find out or suspect that this is a vampire film. And I didn't want to tell you this until this point because the viewer really has no clue. I mean, you kind of suspect it, but like this is the moment where you're like, oh, this is a vampire film. But I didn't want to tell you right off the bat until we got to this point for reasons that I'll get into later. But yes, she drinks this goat's blood and she is horrified. She is just like, what is happening to me? What did I do? She's just very in shock by it, but in quite a short amount of time, she kind of just understands that she probably has to drink animals' blood to survive. So she gets into a good groove, another groove of just killing birds and drinking their blood and storing their carcasses under her bed. And she's really in like a good rhythm with life. But that's not to say that her daily life is any better. She is still incredibly, incredibly lonely. She spends a lot of her days with Sheetal, but Sheetal does go back to her home village at some point, so then she's just left alone. So her days are just incredibly lonely, like solitude, boring, but she does get a lot of happiness and fulfillment out of her job as a night cleaner. One day, she realizes that the birds that she's been killing are coming back to life. And she realizes, like, I have got to tell Gopal what's going on because their house is kind of smelling of dead animals, and he asks her what's up. So she chooses to tell Gopal, and they spend a really lovely day together. And then Gopal agrees to let Uma turn him into a vampire. And so she does. And unfortunately, Uma doesn't turn him. She actually ends up killing him. And she's pretty sad about this because they had a very lovely day together. They actually ended up kind of finding like peace in their marriage and peace in their friendship, and even like having sex finally for the first time. So she's actually very sad that Gopal has died. She sits with his body for several days. It's starting to stink. The neighbors are just kind of like, what is this smell? What is going on? They call her a witch. All these goats that she has been drinking their blood basically come back to life as like little feral goats, and they are not leaving her alone. They're like obsessed with her. So they're like, following her to her shack and stuff. Basically, there's a lot going on, and the neighbors start to really wonder what the heck is up with this person. Finally, she gets the help of Sheetal and her Hijra friend, and she sort of starts to dismember Gopal's body before taking the rest of it to the shore to burn it. And after she burns the body, she's coming back and she passes out, and she's saved by a few monks who take her to their monastery and patch her up. And they drop her off back home. And when she arrives back home, she realizes that the neighbors are about to storm her house. A whole mob of neighbors with torches are at her door, and they throw the fire in, they set it on fire. And she's freaked out, so she starts to run, and she's pursued by the mob through the neighborhood. And she is finally rescued by Sheetal's husband, and her Hijra friend, who doesn't have a name as well. I couldn't find the name of the person. But just as they're about to get away in a car, the mob swarms the car. And in a really hilarious scene, she gets out, scares the mob away, and is able to get away with her friends. And in the final scenes, we see her boarding a train, basically embracing her new self, donning a black sari, donning black nail polish, showing off her new vampire teeth, and taking the train to we don't know where, but really embracing the solitude, embracing who she is. And it ends with just a very lovely scene of her going off in the distance and still being pursued by the goats that are totally obsessed with her. And that's the film. I'm well aware that, you probably heard that plot summary and you're like, what? What is that film? And like I said, I really don't know if the plot did it justice. For starters, it's such a weird and wacky film. It's unlike any other Hindi language film that I've seen before, Bollywood or independent. It's so weird. It's filmed in a Wes Anderson style kind of film work. the animals that come back to life are stop motion. So you have this like really funny, whimsical, magical realism to it. She herself is like a great physical comedic. She's not a comedic actress. Like she's just an actress, but like her physical comedy is so funny in this film. On top of that, the film has very little dialogue. And so it's hard, like you get a lot of the plot just from her acting and the cinematography. And yeah, like it's a punk rock Wes Anderson dark comedy film about vampires set in urban India. And it's so unlike any other film or any other kind of vampire film I've seen before, which is why I wanted to talk about it today. I think this film is an homage to doing your own thing. And you see it in the film work, you see it in the story, and that's what we are going to analyze today. Let's start with the story, because everything kind of comes from that. This story is about a traditional marriage. Gopal goes to work, Uma stays home and takes care of the house. She is a trad wife, and this lifestyle does not work for her at all. And it's what's expected of her, that nobody has asked her to do anything else other than to cook and basically maintain the house. And she's so bored. She's so unfulfilled by it. She's also just a very naturally, what's the word? Like not revolting character. She's a kind of rebellious character, naturally. She blows like a week's allowance on one day's grocery and Gopal scolds her, and she's just very rebellious. Like, don't get mad at me kind of thing. But at the same time, she also holds Gopal to the standard of just knowing how to be a better husband, even though he himself doesn't know. He doesn't know what to do, but she demands a lot from him. And I think also, she doesn't like that he goes out to drink every night. She's very annoyed by it, and she pushes back on him. And basically, she's very unhappy with this life. And when the movie starts, she's not somebody who's just accepting the way things are. She's demanding things from Gopal. She's demanding that he step up as a husband. He goes out drinking, so she demands that he like come up with a fun plan for her to do as well, because she wants to have fun. It's a very interesting thing because she just asks a lot. Like she just doesn't accept things the way they are. And the night that they're fighting after the wedding, Gopal even asks her, like, why can't you just be like everybody else? And, I think they contrast her to a lot of the other wives who basically just accept the way things are, except that maybe the home life is very boring, but this is the balance you get in this type of marriage. Like, I will provide for you, you take care of the house. And she's just not able to sit with that and be okay with that. She finds this life as a wife just so incredibly draining, and she gets no fulfillment of it. But it's very important to note that Kandhari is not making a commentary on this type of marriage. He's not making commentary on traditional marriage at all, or arranged marriages. He's just showing how awkward it is for these two people, because Uma is the person who can't just like go along with this role. Gopal can, but she can't. But often they're very quiet shack. Like their shack is in a row of other shacks, a koli. So a lot of times we see the camera panning across the koli until we get to their house, and it's juxtaposed with all the other families who live there. And their houses are so vibrant, and they're full of life, and they're playing with their kids, or they're all interacting as a family. Like, he is intentional in showing us that he is not making a commentary on arranged marriages or this type of marriage at all. He is just saying that this does not work for Uma. And it's important to note that, like, she feels in the same situation. She's a housewife. She's bored out of her mind, but she adores her husband. Like, they have a very lovely life together, and she's not at all upset about it. She accepts it, but Uma can't. Another thing to note is they're very alone. Like, as a married couple, they're alone. They don't really ever talk about their family. Even when they go to Gopal's cousin's wedding, they're not interacting with anybody. But them as a couple is very isolated in Mumbai. And then on top of that, she herself is just very lonely. I mentioned that there's a lot of shots of her just sitting in the house by herself or sitting outside the house. And it really emphasizes this idea that she is alone in this marriage. They both are, but this is her story, so we don't really see Gopal's side of it. But like, she is just alone. And her loneliness is often juxtaposed with like how bustling and busy it is. They live in Mumbai, so during the day, there's so much traffic, there's so much going on. And like everybody has something to do, somewhere to go, except for her or her and Sheetal. Like she'll be sitting outside her house when all these cars are going by, but she's just sitting for like hours with nothing to do. There's a hilarious scene where she and Sheetal are sitting on a grass, basically just like lying around doing nothing. And the camera, you see that the grass that they're sitting on is just like the center of a roundabout. Like there's all these cars going around, and it's just these two women sitting in the center because they have nothing to do. And it really brings home this idea that like in a city that's so alive, that is so bustling, like they are finding such a lack of things to do, lack of fulfillment. For her, it's a lack of purpose. And it's a really great juxtaposition because she seems to come more alive when it's night. And in the night scenes, Mumbai is quiet, or at least as part of Mumbai is quiet. It's very dead. There's hardly any sounds. And that's when she comes alive. And that's when she just has so much energy, or she can't sleep, or she goes out exploring. Even before she turns into a vampire, she walks around at night because she can't sleep. It's such a juxtaposition that she comes alive when the city is like dead, but when the city is so bustling and alive, she is just bored and doesn't have any purpose. It's also important to note that her and Gopal are very alone in their marriage. They have absolutely no friendship. They have no sexual relationship. And it's not for her lack of trying, but like they are totally strangers to one another. They did know each other as children. So like they're not totally strangers, but like they have no relationship. He's like a little kid, and she is so frustrated with that. And she's just so frustrated with his inability to like step up to this idea of a husband that she has, or to basically meet her where she is, even though she herself is not an ideal wife. She's so frustrated by him. And this like tension, she takes it out on him. And it's almost sad because it's not his fault. Like he's also new to being a husband. He doesn't know any better. But it really builds up and builds up until the cousin's wedding, when she is just sick of the situation. She's sick of like the cousin's wedding being the fun event that she was supposed to be looking forward to. And it's just them sitting in like a quiet room while the ceremony happens. Then she goes and unplugs the fly zapper, and that's when she's bitten by a vampire fly. And I didn't know vampire flies were a thing. I don't know if it's a thing. I feel like I've circled around vampire lore enough that I have never heard of a vampire fly. In my opinion, I would be freaked out if vampire flies were a real thing in lore or mythology. Like that just feels a whole lot more dangerous than like a bat or a human being a vampire, because they could be anywhere. I've never heard of a vampire fly, but it is the vampire fly at the wedding that bit her and turned her into a vampire. Such a weird thing. Maybe it's a thing. I don't know. But it is this night that really is the breaking point for her. Like, I think she expects her marriage to give her more happiness and more fulfillment than it's giving her. And she is just like at her breaking point. She's so fed up with Gopal. Gopal is just like, what more do you want? Like, this is the marriage. This is what we signed up for. Like, I don't know how to make this better for you. And so it all kind of culminates into this night that she's bitten by a vampire fly. They have a huge fight, and she ends the night being sick. But I think because of this, the next morning is when she decides to do something about it. And at first she just chooses to go be pathetic and cry on the beach. And then she realizes that's what everybody else is doing. And she's like, I cannot be like everybody else. This is just too sad. So I'm going to go get a job as a night cleaner. And so she goes and gets a job as a night cleaner. And I think it's interesting to note that the night cleaner job is the job that basically gives her purpose, gives her fulfillment. She finds her own way through that job, and it has nothing to do with turning into a vampire. I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but it's almost like the vampire storyline is a secondary storyline. And when I was watching this film in the theaters, I was like, okay, like this is an interesting job. The trailer doesn't tell you she turns into a vampire. So at this point, I was like, okay, like this is going to be their life as a married couple. Like, let's see where it goes. And then she turns into a vampire. But when I say, like, I didn't even want to say this up front because it's not a vampire film. Like, if I was going to tell you that this was like a Wes Anderson style dark comedy vampire film, I think you would have been expecting a lot of more. I think you were expecting like her contending with being a vampire, or I don't know, trying to eat people. Like you would have assigned a lot of expectations to this film, and none of those things exist. I obviously suspected that she was a vampire, but you really don't even get that like hard verification until the very, very end when she dons all black, paints her nails black, wears black lipstick, and shows like the vampire teeth. And that's in the last minute. And that's the first time you really get this like traditional idea or traditional image of a vampire. And I don't think the movie's about being a vampire. I did a lot of research when I was working on this film, and I came across an interview with Karan Kandhari, which I'm going to link. I'm going to link a few articles that I used as a reference, but he really talks about how this film is about being an outsider. In the article, he basically talks about like how the film isn't about like revolting against a system or trying to change things. It's really finding your own way and finding what works with you and being at peace with being an outsider, despite what society says about you, despite what other people expect of you, but just finding your own way. We really see that when Uma becomes a night cleaner because, like I said, even before she becomes a vampire, she was always kind of restless at night. So being a night cleaner gives her something to do. And through that, she meets her friend who operates the elevator, and he's a very quiet guy. He doesn't talk to anybody. He keeps to himself. And one of his favorite things to do is just to take the elevator to the roof and just sit quietly and like watch the stars and watch the sky from the roof. And one of the turning points in the film is when she actually just decides to sit up there with him, and they don't talk. They both fall asleep, and it's just, it's a quiet rebellion, and it's just an example of a person living their life in a way that they want to, regardless of what's expected. And she sees that in him. She sees that in the Hijra community that she crosses all the time. Hijras are a third sex community, and she makes peace with them. The same day that she spends the night with the elevator guy, she finally crosses this community in the daytime, and she sees how like nice and welcoming they are, and she just has like a tea with them and hangs out with them for like a little bit in the morning. She basically gets to see all these other ways that people live their life the way they want to, regardless of ways society tells them to. And it helps her be at peace with her life. Her marriage is really unsuccessful at this point. She's not going anywhere. And she tried. She really did try to make this marriage happen. She tried to be a good wife. She tried to initiate sex and tried to, get to know Gopal. And none of those things really went anywhere. So she's given up on that entirely. We even see Gopal like make more of an effort than her at some point because she's just very happy with the way this life is, and it finally works for her. The flip side of that, and I think an important point that Kandhari is making, is that even when you are living a very quiet life, even when you are doing what you want to do, just your existence can be an act of rebellion to others. And we see that with her neighbors. Besides Sheetal, she just has no interest in getting to know her neighbors. A lot of them gossip about her, especially one woman in particular, and she just has no interest in playing nice with them, no interest in getting along with them, and it definitely casts her as an outsider. They gossip about her first because she's a new bride, second because they could tell that, they see her leaving when Gopal's coming, so they know that she's basically, like, they're not having much of a sex life, probably. Like, they gossip about her for all these reasons. When her apartment starts to smell with Gopal's body, they suspect she's a witch. At one point, one of the neighbors basically follows her into the house and sees Gopal's body, and she knocks this neighbor out. It's the same neighbor who gossips about her. But it all lends to like all of them just thinking that she's a witch and thinking that she's a horrible person. And it's an important point to note that like you don't have to revolt, you don't have to try and change a system, but you have to be prepared for the fact that you just doing your own thing is still going to be an affront to some people who just can't handle that. Another main aspect of the story is definitely finding your tribe. I talked about it with her elevator friends, with Sheetal, with her Hijra friend. She finds these like people that she finds solace in. And it's very sad because the last day that she has with Gopal is a very lovely day. Like they kind of just fully accept that they're friends. And it sort of ends with him trying to, like, making a very sweet gesture for her. They spend a lovely evening together. They get drunk together. We think that they eventually have sex. Like, it's just such a beautiful last day together where they finally have peace and happiness in their relationship. And And then he dies. And it's so sad because he is not meant to continue in this journey with her. Like, he is not meant to continue this vampire life with her. She is meant to like go on alone. He always belonged to like a different, not tribe in the literal sense, but like he couldn't be a part of this with her. And it's very sad because they finally had a good marriage. But I will say that it's interesting that after she cremates his body is when she actually just starts to get help coming out of the woodwork. So up until this point, Sheethal helps her. Sheethal goes out of town, comes back, and then we don't see her, but she lends Uma a saw to cut up the body. Her Hijra friend gets a driver to take Uma and the body close to the beach, but he bails. Like, he'll take her only part of the way, and then she's forced to push the body in a shopping cart the rest of the way. But after the body is burned, she gets help coming out of the woodworks. So a sadhu, which is a religious wanderer, appears. Like, she's just sitting in the dawn in front of the burned body, and the sadhu appears, and he bathes himself in the ashes, and then he sort of puts ashes on her face, and then together they collect Gopal's ashes. And then she's walking. She basically just has to walk back home, and she's walking, and she passes out from heat and exhaustion and starvation. And she's rescued by these monks who take her in, give her a place to bathe, recover. They fix up her nose, which is broken. And then when they give her a ride back home. And when she gets home, she's running from these people who are after her, and Sheethal and Sheethal's husband and her Hijra friend, like, basically kidnap her and take her to a car to drive her away. And I just think it's beautiful that, like, even though this door closed and even though the story is saying, like, this traditional marriage did not work for you, like, you have all these other people that are showing up for you that are able to help you. I want to run through a few motifs real quick. There's a motif of trains. The movie starts and ends with the train. It's such a funny juxtaposition because when the movie starts, they're in their full wedding gear, sitting on a train. It's late at night. Everyone's passed out. And the train very much symbolizes carrying her to a new life. And the next time we see the train, she takes the train to the end of the line. And that's the day that she tries to cry, but ends up getting a job as a night cleaner. And then after that, she doesn't take the train. She always walks to work, even though it's like a 4-hour walk. There's another instance where she takes, after her and Gopal spend the day thinking about it, they basically end up at the beach with friends, and they bail on the friends, and she takes the train back home, but Gopal misses the train, and instead of taking another train, he walks. And I feel like that's a symbolization that she is entering this new chapter, but he is not coming with her on it. And her new chapter is, this is the end of her marriage. It's the end of his marriage too, but his chapter does not go on, or his story does not go on. And then the movie ends with her taking a train to a new life. So we have this image of a train, and in other instances, she walks to work. The first night of her work, her elevator friend gives her a ride on a bike. They take a bus together at some point, and like, it's just very distinct when a train is used. And at some point I was like, well, why doesn't she just take the train to and from work instead of walking? But one, it's probably expensive, but two, it's a distinct narrative choice to keep the train for very specific moments. I mentioned this one already, but there's such a juxtaposition of day and night when the city is so busy and bumbling, and she and Sheethal are just dead and have nothing to do and are so bored and walk around like zombies and talk in such deadpan voices, versus at night when, the elevator guy is working and her Hijra friends are out and she is working herself. Like, there's such a juxtaposition between being alive at night and being dead in the day. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later, but I just wanted to hint on that because even before the vampire stuff happens, like I said, this is kind of a theme that we see from the start of the film. Even when she's taking the train, the very first scene, the entire train is asleep and she's awake, like fully awake and alert. So it is set up that she is a night person through and through. I mentioned that, like, this is, again, if watch the film, but all of the animals come back as like really funny, like stop motion animals, and they're all a little bit feral and they're all a little bit wild, and they're all also a little bit obsessed with her, and it adds a very magical realism aspect to it. It adds like a Wes Anderson feel, but it also kind of gives you this notion that like when one person, like it's this notion of like inspiring other people to be free. And she turns the goats into like wild goats. And the first time she realized the goat has come back to life, it's like wreaking havoc and running away and laughing from like people that are trying to catch it. And it's just this notion that like you can inspire others to basically find rebellion and to rebel in their own lives and to find what works for them as well. The last motif I really want to dive into is this motif of outsiders. I kind of been mentioning a lot of terms of different communities, and I just want to run through them a little bit more deeply. So there's a group of people, a Hijra community that she passes, to and from work. And a Hijra community is a third sex community in India and in Pakistan. And they are basically people who have been, more or less, they're third sex. So a lot of times they've been shunned from their families and they find solace, they join other hijras in this community, and they live on the outskirts of society. And so the fact that first she's very intimidated by these women, they present as women, so I'll call them women. She's very intimidated by these women because they're always like saying hi to her at night when she's going to work. And the first time she sees them in the daytime, she's not afraid of them. And that's when she sits and has tea with them. And it's important that they're included because they're people who live on the outskirts of society. They're not, they don't get a lot of, they have to basically rely on sex work, or like sometimes like they are religious figures, like they are seen as religious figures as well. But I guess the point is like they are very much outside of society. They don't get to participate in society the way other people do. That said, I do want to note that like there have been a lot of laws trying to give them more protections, more resources, more help. There are definitely things that have been doing to acknowledge their third sex, to give them better resources, to help, to just give them more protections and more support. So I really do want to acknowledge that even though for the most part, these are people who live outside of society, I also do want to acknowledge the change that has been happening because I think that's progressive for India and Pakistan to be doing these things. I also mentioned a sadhu. A sadhu is a religious wanderer who basically they wander from religious site to religious site. So when the sadhu appears at the place where she cremated Gopal, it's kind of this symbol that like he sees it as a religious site. He bathes himself in the ashes, and he bathes her in the ashes, which is symbolized washing away her sins. So she is truly able to start anew. But it was important that it was a sadhu because they also live outside of society. They reject normal ways of living. They live off the land, live off the graciousness of people, but they very much on the outskirts of society. The last group of people who help her are the monks, live in a monastery. And that's another group of people that kind of just shun the way life is, shun our normal day-to-day, consumerist kind of lifestyle and live in a very specific way. And they also give her help. And it's another importance that, all these communities of outsiders see her as one of them and are very willing to accept her and willing to give her help and help her along this journey. And like I said, Kandhari says that this film is very much a film about outsiders, and we see that the people who are most kind to her, the people that help her on this journey, are all outsiders in their own right, and they allow her to be an outsider in her own right. And I think that's very beautiful. Okay, now we're going to talk about the filmmaking aspects. This is a Hindi language film, but it was produced by a British production company, Film 4, and Karan Kandhari himself is British. So it's like a British production, Hindi language film. Regardless, I will say it's an Indian film because it's set in India, stars Indian actors, it's Hindi. So it's an Indian film. And personally, to me, I've said this already, but it's unlike a lot of Indian films I've seen, both in its kind of whimsical filming way, both in its content. But Kandhari was very intentional with the way he wanted this to be filmed. He wanted the filming to be very different from what we see in Bollywood films, which has a lot of vibrant colors and warm colors and a lot of things pop on screen. And it's a very colorful film, but there's definitely a cooler tone to it. The film was shot on 35 millimeter film, which allowed them to like really bring out contrast in the darker scenes and allow it to have like a cool more real element to it. You don't feel like you're watching something cinematic so much as you're watching something that is an everyday life portrayal. I guess to me personally, it just didn't feel like a romanticization or a dramatization of a story. Their shack is always painted dark blue, and they really use like the intentional direction. The Coley was built so that they kept the direction of the sun in mind. So the only, like, everything in the shack is dark, and it's next to all these other shacks. So like you only have one window and one door, and the light comes through that. So like the lighting is just very intentional, but the inside of the shack is always very dark, especially dark at night, but very dark during the day. There's always just relying on external sources for light. And it really kind of goes to bring home this idea that for her, this married life is like a darkness. This married life is like a chain. It's like a burden on her, and it's not something that she could sit well with. That said, when we see the street, when we see her out and about, when we see her outfits, it's very like, not all her outfits are very lightly colored, but like there is more color to it. And I think that helps lend to like this Wes Anderson feel to the story. Like the daytime shots are very kind of pastel colors. She herself has like a massive yellow bucket that she carries to and from work. And to me, like, I think we needed those lighter colors. Like, this is a dark comedy, but one, because it's a vampire film, it's really refreshing to have it be in very light colors and brighter colors. And also, like, it's kind of a commentary on marriage. Like, it's a very heavy topic that he's circling the drain on, and I think it helps to have it be such a light color during the daytime. It helps to kind of use the natural colors that you see in Indian households and in Indian clothing, because it adds a lighter element to it. It allows you to go into it and be like, oh, this isn't a heavy movie about vampires, or it isn't a heavy movie about commentary on marriage. Like, it's a light film. It's meant to be a light film. I left it out because it's hard to explain, and I didn't want to spoil it, but there are so many laugh out loud moments. And you really get that. Like, you were meant to laugh out loud despite the fact that it's a darker film. And the lighting definitely uses that. And I think, like I said, the lighting, like the colors that you just see in traditional Indian households and traditional Indian clothing, just on the streets of Mumbai, add so much to the film that they don't have to do a lot extra to make it seem brighter or more vivacious. They really rely on it, and they don't exaggerate it in any way. And so it gives us this sense of it being a lighter film while not exaggerating it or making it over the top or making it seem even more like a comedy or a Bollywood or a huge drama or something like that. The last thing I'll say about lighting is that it's definitely used to show her evolution. So when the movie starts, she wears like a golden sari a lot, and it's always juxtaposed against the blueness of the house. And she's kind of like a warm center inside of this dark house. It's definitely like she contrasts it. It symbolizes like she is trying to bring warmth to this house. She is trying to bring liveliness, to make it a home, to make it a marriage. And as she starts to become more and more of a vampire and transition into a vampire, she wears darker and darker colors. And the sari that she's wearing when she passes out and the night that she first kills a goat is like a blue sari. And it just goes to show her transition into being a creature of the night. Like, she herself dons these black colors and goes out into the night. And she doesn't wear black until the end, but she does wear darker colors. And after she turns Gopal and she kind of sits with his body, basically I think just hoping it'll come back to life as a vampire, but it's slowly decaying. She's back to being in gold. She wears his shirt, which is gold. And it's always juxtaposed against their house, which is very dark. When they're fighting, the fight that they have after the wedding, very, very, very darkly lit. It just kind of shows like the darkness of their marriage. The only time that they are lit within the house, or well lit within the house, is the night that they get drunk together and have sex, and she turns him into a vampire. And then when she sits with him after he dies, like, that's the only time the inside of the house is lit. And it's kind of showing her internal journey that she has come to not see this marriage as a burden, but it's too late. And, you know, there's a scene where they basically, she makes him plan an excursion or a fun day for them. And so he plans to take her to the beach, but they take a bus to get there, and the bus takes like 12 hours there, and they only have 15 minutes at the beach before they have to take the bus back. And the bus is very cramped and not cramped, but just cramped and dark. Like, even though it's out during the day, like the bus is another symbolization of darkness. When they're sitting at the wedding for the cousin, it's very darkly lit except for the fire that's at the center. Like, marriage is just always portrayed as a very dark element in her life. And that's juxtaposed with like the beauty that she finds in her nightlife, which is she sees the moon and it's shining bright. When she is with her friend who takes the elevator to the roof, the elevator is always brightly lit. Like, there's just so much more light that she gets in her nightlife. There's so much more like aliveness that she gets, but anything around her marriage is just portrayed with a lot of darkness. I want to shout out the director of photography, Sverre Sørdal, because I read an article in which he talked about his work on this film, and I think he did a great job, a fantastic job with it. But he talks about how when he read the script, he got a very expressionism feel to the movie, and you really see that because the whole movie is not about what the objective reality is. It is Uma's perspective. It is, it is her unfulfillment that she finds in her day-to-day life, despite what is happening around her. It is how she comes alive at night with her job and also being a vampire. It's how she perceives these animals that she's turned coming back to life and being feral and being wild and also being weirdly devoted to her. Like, it creates the whimsy out of it, or creates like the whimsical element to it. And I think that's what makes this like a very different kind of film. And I think he does a really wonderful job of capturing that. I think the lighting, the coloring, the directing, all of that really, really, really lends to this idea of expressionism. And so I think it's just very important to shout it out because they did a great job with it. I also want to shout out Radhika Apte's acting. She is phenomenal in this movie. She is just such a funny, I already mentioned that she has great comedic timing, and she's just an actor. Like, she's not specifically a comedic actor, but the way she inhabits Uma is just so wonderful. Uma has a very de-intellectualized way of moving, and so you can really see from her movements that she is very rooted in impulse, and even when she talks, she's very abrupt. Like, she doesn't think before she talks. She's very like impulsive. She's very just naturalistic, animalistic, a little bit feral. Like, as she herself becomes more and more a vampire, she's very feral herself in some ways. And I think it's so important that she is kind of naturally this way because, again, Kandhari is not saying that being a vampire made her feral or being a vampire made her impulsive. Like, she already had all of these traits in her. She was already someone who spoke her mind without necessarily thinking much beforehand. She was already someone who did things impulsively. She was already somebody who moved in a certain way. And being a vampire really was just the through line that helped her become this even more. It was almost like an excuse. She could just be who she was because there was no changing it at this point. The last thing I want to talk about is the sound. This is such a quiet film. Well, not quiet, but there's no dialogue, or there's very little dialogue. And that goes to kind of show you how lonely she is in her day-to-day life, how empty it is. I mentioned a lot that the quietness of her life is juxtaposed with the busyness of Mumbai. And her nightlife is very quiet, and she embraces it. And the movie relies so much on her acting and on the cinematography and the directing and all of that to basically convey the story. Her acting more than anything, because there's not a ton of dialogue in the film. So many scenes go by where it's just quiet, and she's happy with that quietness, and she comes to peace with it. But at first, like, the quietness in her life is almost deafening. And sometimes, like at first, when she's first married, the sounds that are loud is when she's eating a cracker or when she's like brushing her teeth. And like at first that sound is just meant to like really echo the loneliness that she has, the lack of dialogue, the intense solitude that she feels. And then she comes more and more at peace with it. And so it doesn't seem as deafening as the movie goes on. But yeah, I think it's important to note that this is a film with like very little dialogue. I think it was a 110-page screenplay, and it's understandable because there's not a lot that's spoken in it. So I thought that was a very interesting thing to note, that, you know, I had talked about another film in which sound was like very much a story element, and this is kind of the same way in the sense that the sound and the lack of dialogue really drives home this theme that she is very alone in her life, but eventually she finds peace with it. Eventually that solitude and that quiet isn't so deafening, and she's actually okay with it. I'm going to wrap up with just some last minute thoughts. So when she turns into a vampire, before she realizes that she has to feed on animals, she's just not able to eat any food. So she's not eating anything, and she's losing weight. And they show that she's losing weight because her sari blouse is like falling off her shoulder, and then later it's falling off both shoulders. And I just thought that was a really wonderful visual element to show that she's losing weight, because sari blouses are always made to fit you. So it falling off her is the indication that she's just getting smaller and smaller. Another thing I want to mention is I talked about how Gopal doesn't take the train with her at the end, and it's kind of like a narrative element to indicate to us that his journey is not going on. Similarly, we really see that there's no life for her in this place without Gopal. There's a scene where she tries, I think it's before she gets rid of the body, she tries to just go out drinking by herself, and it is such a sad and pathetic experience that she's just like, I can't be here, and she bails. But it's meant to show us that like there is no life here for her without Gopal. Like she didn't love the life here with him, but there's nothing for her here without him. Another question I had was, why a vampire film? Like, why use vampires to tell this story? And the obvious answer is that she is, you know, a nocturnal animal. She's on like outside of society, opposed to it. So by making her a night creature like vampires are, you can really drive home this idea that she is really not meant to be a part of society in the way she originally thought she was. But I think there's another element to it in that vampires, like, you know, have to drink blood to get a life, to sustain life and to be able to live. They have to basically drain another life force. And in a way, it could be a metaphor for her marriage. Like, she's being drained of a life force for this marriage to work, or for Gopal to have a wife, or whatever it is. Like, part of it is a commentary on the marriage itself, that for this marriage to exist, she is being drained of her life force. And so by making her a vampire is giving the power back to her, to be the one to have more volition, to be the one to drain the life force of others. But instead of making that a sad thing, except for with Gopal, it makes it that she brings things to life and almost frees them a bit and makes them more rebellious and more feral and more themselves. So it's almost taking back this idea of being something that is being drained of the life force to being the thing that is draining other people's life force, but it's not as tragic as it makes it seem. It's actually more alive, like more making them more alive and making them more vibrant and live life more freely. And in closing thoughts, the last question I had was, did we need a punk rock, Wes Anderson style, Indian vampire story set in India? And the answer is yes, 100% yes. This film is so wacky and so weird, and it's such an homage to doing exactly what you want. It's an homage to making decisions that are right for you, running with your own idea, doing what feels best for you. If you want to go get a job as a night cleaner, go do it. If you want to take the train to the end of the beach, go do it. If you want to make a really weird vampire film set in India with a punk rock feel to it, and have it be a totally Wes Anderson style feel, go do it. I think Kandhari really drives home this idea that you should go do what you want. Don't worry about what society says. Don't worry about if society tells you that your vampire needs to be wearing all black all the time, or that your vampire can't exist in the day. Because he throws all the rules out, and he made the movie that he wanted to make. And I think it was successful. It was an extraordinary film, extremely entertaining, one of a kind. This is truly an homage to just doing what you want despite what others expect of you, despite what society expects of you. So in a lot of ways, Kandhari knocked out of the park. The way he filmed it, the way the story exists, what the story is, all led to this idea of doing what you want. So I will end on that thought, guys. It has been great chatting with you. Definitely tune in for next one. If you have not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button. And if you want to follow us or DM us, you can find us on Real Thesis Pod on Instagram and TikTok. And go do what's right for you, guys. Go live your punk rock vampire lifestyle however you want. And we will see you next time.